The light of distant stars streaked across the viewport as Commander Han paced the bridge of the UES Thunderchild. Her ship, one of humanity's finest, gleamed with freshly painted hull plates and polished metal. This was meant to be a day of celebration, not the disaster it was about to become. "They're approaching, Commander," said Officer Lee, his eyes fixed on the scanner. "The Concordat diplomatic vessel will be within hailing range in 2 minutes." Han nodded, smoothing down her uniform. Humanity's first official meeting with the Galactic Concordat, a union of 17 spacefaring species, would shape Earth's future among the stars. She had rehearsed this moment countless times. "Ready the welcome protocols," she ordered. "And someone tell engineering to dial back the reactor output. These aliens get nervous when they see our power signatures." But it was already too late. The Concordat ship, a beautiful curved vessel that resembled a silver leaf, suddenly changed course. Its communication array blazed with urgent signals. "They're broadcasting some kind of alert," Communications Officer Kim reported, confusion evident in her voice. I think they believe we're targeting them." Han's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. Our weapon systems are completely powered down as agreed." On the main screen, the alien vessel's defensive shields flickered to life. A shimmering bubble of energy that human scientists had only theorized about, but something was wrong. The shield pattern looked unstable, fluctuating wildly. "Commander," the tactical officer shouted, "their shield harmonics are interfering with their engine core." Han recognized the danger immediately. "Open a channel. Emergency broadcast." But before Kim could establish the link, the diplomatic vessel's engines flared brilliantly. A cascade of energy rippled along its sleek hull. Han didn't hesitate. Her hand slammed down on the emergency response control, grabbed them with the tractor beam, full power to forward shields. The Thunderchild's advanced systems responded instantly, forming a protective bubble around both ships and catching the failing alien vessel in a stabilizing beam. The bridge crew worked frantically, faces illuminated by the glow of emergency lighting. The alien ship shuddered, then split apart in a series of controlled explosions rather than a single catastrophic one. All thanks to the Thunderchild's lightning-fast intervention, but it wasn't enough to save everyone. "We've got survivors," reported the sensor operator. "Our tractor beam caught their escape pods. About half the diplomatic team made it out." Han closed her eyes briefly. Half. Only half of the representatives sent to welcome humanity to the galactic community had survived. In the aftermath, the Concordat representatives huddled in the Thunderchild's medical bay, their alien features displaying emotions Han couldn't fully read. One of them, tall with iridescent skin that shifted colors with each breath, approached her. "Your ship," the alien said in carefully practiced human language. It reacted impossibly fast. "Standard emergency protocols," Han explained. "Our systems are designed to respond to threats within microseconds." The alien's skin darkened to a deep blue. "But the power required, no Concordat vessel could generate such energy without weeks of preparation. And your weapons—" "We didn't fire any weapons," Han corrected gently. "The beam that caught our ship," the alien continued. "Our sensors classified it as a weapon. The energy output alone would have destroyed a small moon." Han understood then. What humans considered a routine emergency tractor beam, the Concordat saw as a weapon of terrifying power, and they had watched as the Thunderchild activated it almost instantly, without warning or apparent effort. Later, she stood before the surviving diplomats in the ship's conference room, trying to explain the misunderstanding. Their ship's sensors had misinterpreted the Thunderchild's power systems as weapons charging. In their panic, they had activated their shields incorrectly, causing the catastrophic engine failure. "We meant no harm," Han said firmly. "This was a terrible accident." The lead diplomat, now recovered enough to speak, fixed her with 4 gleaming eyes. "Perhaps. But you must understand what we witnessed today. Your rescue beam deployed faster than our best combat vessels can fire. The power readings from your ship during the incident exceeded the combined output of an entire Concordat defense fleet. And this," the diplomat gestured around, "is not even your warship. This is merely your diplomatic vessel." Han didn't correct the misconception. The Thunderchild was, in fact, a frontline warship, simply cleaned up for diplomatic duty. If they were this frightened by what they'd seen today, how would they react to learning the truth? Unknown to Han, 30 light-years away, the Galactic Security Council was already convening an emergency session. Preliminary reports from the surviving diplomats had caused alarm among the elder species. Humans, with their primitive technology, had somehow created weapon systems of devastating power and speed. Worse, they seemed to employ this power with casual ease. They must be contained, argued one counselor. No species should wield such destructive potential so recklessly. But they saved half our diplomatic team, countered another. Their reflexes prevented total annihilation. The debate would rage for days, but one thing was already becoming clear to the gathered representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Humans were different, dangerously different. As the council deliberated, the classification of humans as a warlike species requiring containment gained more support with each passing hour. Back on the Thunderchild, Commander Han stared out at the stars, unaware that humanity's first step into the galactic community had already branded them as too deadly to walk among the civilized species of the cosmos. 6 months had passed since the diplomatic disaster, and Admiral Tay stood motionless before the memorial wall aboard the Concordat flagship Eternal Vigilance. His 3-fingered hand traced the name of his old friend, lost in the explosion that day. The memory still burned fresh. The sudden flash of light, the debris scattered across the void, and the human vessel hovering nearby, seemingly undamaged despite being close enough to be consumed by the blast. "Admiral, we've lost another supply convoy," reported his second-in-command, breaking his moment of reflection. "The pirates hit them in the Cygnus Passage. That's the 4th this month." Tay's skin darkened with concern. The pirate raids had grown bolder, more coordinated. What had begun as isolated incidents had evolved into a crisis threatening the stability of 3 sectors. "Show me," he said simply. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the wreckage of cargo vessels scattered across an asteroid field. The pirates had left nothing but destruction in their wake. "Our patrol vessels were outmaneuvered again," his officer continued. "By the time reinforcements arrived, the pirates had vanished into the dust clouds. We lost 23 crew members." Tay studied the tactical readout, noting the pirates' increasingly sophisticated attack patterns. The Concordat fleet, designed for ceremonial displays of unity and peacekeeping among willing participants, was proving woefully inadequate against an enemy that actually wanted to fight. "The Council is demanding action," his officer added quietly. "They've suggested exploring all available options." Both knew what that meant, the unspoken option that no one wanted to voice aloud. 3 days later, Tay found himself aboard a diplomatic shuttle approaching Earth's orbital defense perimeter. The massive human stations tracked his vessel with sensors he could detect even through his shuttle's hull, a constant probing awareness that felt almost predatory. "Concordat. Vessel, maintain your approach vector," came the crisp instruction from Earth Control. "You are cleared to dock at Station Alpha. Deviation from your assigned flight path will be considered hostile action." The warning was unnecessary but typical of humans, direct, unambiguous, with clear consequences. So different from the diplomatic flourishes that would have accompanied such instructions in Concordat space. The meeting with the United Earth Government's Defense Council was equally straightforward. Tay explained the situation, outlined the pirate threat, and formally requested assistance. He had expected lengthy negotiations, demands for concessions or trade agreements. Instead, the human representatives asked pointed questions about pirate numbers, tactics, and bases. "3 warships," said General Song, a compact woman with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that reminded Tay of the black holes at the galaxy's center, pulling in all light, revealing nothing. "We can have them ready in 72 hours. They'll operate under joint command, with your Admiralty providing strategic direction and our captains handling tactical execution. 3 warships. Not the dozen Ty had hoped for, but perhaps enough to make a difference. Yet he couldn't help but feel a chill at how readily these humans offered their deadly vessels for combat. 5 days later, Tay stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance, watching as 3 human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near his position. They bore none of the elegant curves or aesthetic considerations of concordant vessels. These were angular, functional machines built for a single purpose. The UES Thunderbolt, Stormfront, and Avalanche report ready for joint operations, his communications officer announced. The human commander requests a briefing at your convenience. The briefing was tense but productive. The human captains listened to the concordant tactical experts with polite attention, occasionally exchanging glances that Tay couldn't interpret. When asked for their input, they offered suggestions that made his senior officers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "We'll use the neutron star's gravity well as a slingshot," explained Captain Jin of the Thunderbolt, pointing to a spot on the star chart that concordant navigators had marked as absolutely forbidden. "It'll give us the speed to intercept the pirates before they can react." "That's impossible," Tay's navigation officer sputtered. "The gravitational forces would tear your ships apart." Jin simply smiled. "We've reinforced our structural integrity fields. We'll hold together." 2 days later, Tay watched in horrified fascination as the human warships did exactly as they had promised. Their vessels accelerated toward the neutron star at speeds that his scientists had calculated would be fatal, curved around its deadly gravitational pull, and shot out like bullets from an ancient gun, achieving velocities that concordant ships could never match. The pirates, anticipating a response bound by concordant limitations, were caught completely unprepared. The human ships were among them before their sensors could even register the approach. What followed was unlike any battle Tay had witnessed in his long career. The human vessels moved with a savage grace that defied conventional space combat doctrine. When damaged, they didn't retreat to regroup as concordant protocols dictated. Instead, they pressed their attacks with even greater ferocity. Most shocking of all was when the UES Stormfront, taking heavy fire from 3 pirate vessels, deliberately vented plasma from its damaged engine section. The superheated material created a sensor-blinding cloud that confused both friends and foes. Yet somehow the human ship navigated through this chaos to destroy 2 enemy vessels, while they were effectively flying blind. When it was over, the pirate fleet was scattered, or destroyed. The human ships regrouped near the Eternal Vigilance, their hulls scarred but their combat effectiveness seemingly undiminished. In his private quarters later, Tay reviewed the battle footage with growing unease. The tactics these humans employed, the risks they willingly took, went beyond reckless. They had used maneuvers that concordant commanders would consider suicidal. "They don't fight like we do," observed his oldest friend and advisor, watching the replay beside him. "It's as if they don't fear death." "It's worse than that," Tay replied softly. "They've made peace with it. They accept it as the cost of victory." News of the battle spread quickly through concordant space. Relief at the pirates' defeat mingled with disquiet over how it had been accomplished. In the days that followed, the Galactic Security Council convened yet again to discuss the human question. This time their focus wasn't on containment, but understanding. They needed to know more about these strange, deadly allies they had reluctantly embraced. And so, as Tay's ship escorted the human vessels to their next joint operation, a formal evaluation was quietly authorized. The humans had proven themselves effective against pirates, but the question remained, was any ally this dangerous worth the risk? Captain Park stood at the airlock as it cycled open, revealing the 3 concordant observers who would be evaluating his ship and crew. He'd been briefed about this cultural exchange, the polite fiction covering what was clearly a military assessment. After the success against the pirates, the Galactic Security Council wanted to understand exactly what they were dealing with. "Welcome aboard the UES Shiva's Arrow," Park said with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I hope your stay will be educational." The lead observer, a tall being with silvery skin and 4 arms, each ending in 7-fingered hands, inclined its head. "Captain Park, I am Observer Lon. These are my colleagues, Observer Kier and Observer Pell. We appreciate your hospitality." Park nodded to his executive officer. Commander Yoon will show you to your quarters. We begin combat exercises at 800 hours tomorrow. I suggest you rest well." As the aliens were led away, Park caught the nervous glances they exchanged. Good. A little apprehension might keep them honest in their reports. The next morning, the observers assembled on the bridge, data tablets at the ready. Park had ordered the ship prepared for their inspection, not cleaned up or modified, but exactly as it would be during actual combat operations. If the Concordat wanted to understand human warfare, they would see it unvarnished. "Today we'll be running a standard combat readiness drill," Park announced. "Observer Lon, you and your team are welcome to access any area of the ship during the exercise. Commander Yoon will escort you." Lon's metallic eyes blinked rapidly. "Thank you, Captain. We are most interested in observing your crew's response to emergency situations." Park suppressed a smile. "I'm sure you'll find it illuminating." The day's exercises began with a simulated hull breach in the engine section. Park watched through the ship's internal sensors as the observers followed damage control teams into the affected area. The environmental systems had been adjusted to create realistic conditions: choking smoke, flashing emergency lights, and the howl of escaping atmosphere. What surprised the observers was not the efficiency of the repair teams. The Concordat had excellent emergency protocols of their own, but the radiation levels the human crews willingly exposed themselves to during the repair operation. "These radiation readings," Observer Kerr stammered to Commander Yoon as they watched the work. "Your people will suffer cellular damage at these levels." Yoon shrugged. "Medbay can handle radiation treatment. Saving the ship takes priority." By midday, the observers had moved to the Weapons Control Center, where gunners ran targeting drills against simulated enemy vessels. Observer Pell's breathing apparatus wheezed noticeably as she reviewed the tactical displays. "Your targeting systems continue functioning even when main power is cut?" she asked, seven-fingered hands dancing across her data tablet. "Of course," replied the weapons officer without looking up from his console. "Primary, secondary, and tertiary systems. If all else fails, we can manually aim and fire." "Manually?" Pell's voice rose an octave. "Without computational assistance?" The officer finally looked up, confusion crossing his face. "Sure. We drill for it monthly. How else would we fight if systems were compromised?" The observers exchanged glances, making notes that Park couldn't see but could well imagine. By afternoon, the simulations had escalated to a full ship-wide combat scenario. The UES Shiva's Arrow shuddered as its engines pushed it through a complex series of evasive maneuvers. In the Combat Information Center, Park calmly directed his crew through a scenario where they were outnumbered 3-1. "Enemy vessels have surrounding firing positions," reported the tactical officer. "No clear avenue of escape," Park nodded. "Execute Breaking Thunder." The observers watched in stunned silence as the ship's tactical display simulated what would have been, in real combat, a deliberate collision course with the largest enemy vessel. "You would sacrifice your ship?" Lon asked, voice barely audible over the simulated alarms. "Not sacrifice," Park corrected. "We use our forward momentum and reinforced bow to punch through their command deck. It disables their vessel while leaving ours damaged but functional." "The casualties," Lon began, "would be severe," Park admitted. "But the remaining crew would continue the fight." Observer Kerr seemed to be struggling with the concept. "But why not surrender when clearly outmatched? The Concordat military protocols specifically state that when victory is impossible—" "Victory is never impossible," interrupted the ship's tactical officer. "Not while one crewman remains able to fight." The observers fell silent, making more notes. The final phase of the evaluation came late in the ship's day cycle. Park had arranged for the observers to examine the ship's last stand protocols, the systems designed to ensure that even a fatally damaged vessel could still harm its destroyers. In the ship's central computer core, Chief Engineer Cho explained, the automated systems that would activate if the crew were incapacitated. "The ship's AI takes over if life signs drop below threshold," Cho explained, pointing to a sealed black box nestled among the computer banks. "It will continue to execute the last given orders, prioritizing mission completion over vessel survival. Observer. Pell's translation device struggled to keep up with her rapid speech. You mean the ship will fight by itself, without living guidance? That's right. Cho's expression was matter of fact. And if the vessel's structure is compromised beyond repair, the AI will calculate the optimal use of remaining resources. Meaning? Lon asked quietly. Meaning it will ensure the ship takes as many enemies with it as possible, Cho said simply. Usually by overloading the drive core and detonating it within the enemy formation. That night, Park reviewed the day's observations from his quarters. The ship's internal sensors had recorded the observers' reactions throughout the day. Their disbelief, their horror, their incomprehension of human warfare doctrine. On the final day of the evaluation, Park invited the observers to join him in the officers' mess. The room fell silent as they entered, human crew members eyeing the aliens with curiosity. I hope your evaluation has been thorough, Park said, gesturing for them to sit. Do you have any final questions before you prepare your report? Observer Lon seemed to gather himself. Just one, Captain. Your crew, they train for scenarios where survival is statistically impossible. They willingly expose themselves to lethal conditions. Your ship itself is designed to continue fighting, even after all aboard have perished. He paused. Why? Park considered the question, aware that every officer in the room was listening, because that's what humanity has always done. We fight hardest when cornered. We accept damage to achieve objectives. We ensure that victory costs our enemies dearly, even if we're not alive to see it. He leaned forward. It's not about survival. It's about completing the mission, about protecting what matters, whatever the cost. The observers left the next day, their data tablets filled with observations and analyses. As their shuttle departed, Commander Yoon joined Park on the observation deck. What do you think they'll report? She asked. Park watched the shuttle shrink to a distant point of light. The truth. And the truth about us scares them. Neither could have guessed how soon that fear would be tested, or how grateful the Concordat would be for humanity's terrifying approach to warfare. The Concordat observation vessel departed from the UES Shiva's Arrow, leaving Captain Park with an uneasy feeling. The evaluation had gone exactly as expected. The aliens had been horrified by standard human combat protocols. Now all that remained was to wait for their verdict, a process that could take weeks given the Concordat's love of bureaucracy. Park was reviewing crew performance reports in his ready room when the communication alert sounded. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to Admiral Tay, the Concordat officer who had reluctantly sought human help against the pirates. Captain Park, the alien's voice was clipped, his normally blue skin flushed to an alarming purple. We require immediate consultation. Our long-range sensors have detected something approaching Concordat space. The Admiral transmitted the sensor data, and Park felt his blood run cold as he reviewed it. A massive fleet, far larger than anything the pirates could muster, was moving steadily toward the outermost Concordat colonies. How many ships? Park asked, already calculating response times. Over 300 vessels that we can identify, Tay replied. And their configuration. He hesitated. Their configuration matches historical records of the Hive. Park had been briefed on the major galactic powers, including those thought extinct. The Hive had supposedly been wiped out 2,000 years ago after a brutal war with the early Concordat species. They were the bogeymen of galactic history, a species that expanded by consuming all resources in their path, including the inhabitants of conquered worlds. Can your fleet intercept? Park asked, though he already suspected the answer. Not in time to save the border worlds, Tay admitted. Our vessels are spread too thin after the pirate campaign. Even at maximum speed, our main defense fleet is 7 days from the projected point of Hive arrival. Park studied the star charts, mind racing through possibilities. The border worlds? How many people? Nearly 8 billion across 3 planets, Tay said quietly. Evacuation has begun, but our calculations suggest only 30% can be moved before the Hive arrives. Park's eyes fixed on a particular point on the star chart, an unstable pulsar located between the Shivas, Arrow's current position and the border worlds. A crazy idea formed in his mind. "Admiral, what if we could get ships there in 36 hours? Tay's expression changed to one of confusion. "Impossible. Even your human vessels would need at least 5 days to reach that sector." "Not if we use the Kelson pulsar as a jump point," Park said, highlighting the deadly star on the chart. "A tactical FTL jump through its gravity well could slingshot us directly to the border worlds." The Admiral's skin paled to a light blue. "You cannot be serious. The radiation alone would—" "Our shields can handle it," Park interrupted, though in truth he wasn't entirely certain they could. 5 ships. We can have 5 warships at the border in 36 hours. Hours later, Park stood on the bridge of the Shiva's Arrow, watching as 4 other human vessels moved into formation around his ship. The UES Thunderchild, commanded by his old friend Han, had joined them, along with the destroyers Defiant, Relentless, and Indomitable. On the main viewer, a collection of Concordat officials were making their final appeals. "This maneuver has never been attempted," insisted a senior Concordat scientist. "Our simulations show a 97% chance of catastrophic failure." "Noted," Park replied calmly. "We launch in 10 minutes. After the communication ended, Commander Yoon approached his chair. "The crew is ready, Captain. Engineering reports shield modifications are complete, though they're not exactly confident about their effectiveness." Park nodded. "Have all ships transmit their mission data to Concordat Command. If we don't make it, at least they'll have our scan results of the Hive fleet." The bridge fell silent as the reality of their mission sank in. What they were attempting had never been done, using a pulsar's violent energies to boost an FTL. Jump beyond normal parameters. Even if they survived the jump itself, they would be facing an enemy fleet more than 60 times their size. "All hands secure for tactical jump," Park ordered, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "Helm, begin approach to the pulsar." The 5 human warships accelerated toward the pulsar, its deadly radiation already causing their shields to shimmer with the strain. Behind them, a small Concordat observation vessel watched from a safe distance, recording what many believed would be the dramatic end of 5 human crews. "Entering the gravity well," reported the helm officer, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought the increasingly erratic controls. FTL drive spooling up. The ship shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across every console on the bridge. "Hull integrity at 60%, called out the engineering officer. "Radiation levels rising beyond safe limits." Park gripped the arms of his command chair. "Stay on course. All ships, prepare for jump on my mark." On the tactical display, he could see the other 4 vessels struggling against the pulsar's pull, their engines flaring brightly as they fought to maintain position. 3, 2, 1, jump! The universe seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. The bridge filled with a blinding white light as the pulsar's energy interacted with their FTL field. For a moment that seemed to last forever, Park was certain they had miscalculated, that their ships were being torn apart by forces too powerful to withstand. Then reality snapped back into focus. The bridge lighting flickered and steadied. Outside, the stars had changed position dramatically. "Report," Park demanded, blinking away the afterimages still floating in his vision. "We've arrived at the border system," Yoon confirmed, her voice containing a note of disbelief. "But Captain, we've lost contact with the Defiant, Relentless, and Indomitable." Only 2 ships had survived the jump, the Shiva's Arrow and the Thunderchild. 3 crews lost in an instant, gambling everything. On a desperate plan, Park allowed himself exactly 3 seconds to mourn before focusing on the task at hand. "Status of the Hive fleet?" "Entering the system now," replied the tactical officer. "Captain, there are hundreds of them." The main viewer showed the approaching Hive vessels, organic-looking ships that moved in perfect insect-like coordination. Against such numbers, 2 human warships stood no chance of victory in the conventional sense. "Open a channel to the Thunderchild," Park ordered. When Han's face appeared on screen, he could see that she had reached the same conclusion. "Well, we made it," she said with a grim smile. "Now what?" "Now we buy time," Park replied. "Every minute, We keep them busy as another transport ship that escapes with civilians aboard. Han nodded. I see their command vessels. The 3 larger ships at the center of their formation. Take those out, and the rest might fall into disarray. Agreed. Park studied the tactical display. But we'll need to get close. Very close. What followed was what concordant military historians would later describe as criminally reckless tactics beyond the comprehension of civilized warfare. The 2 human vessels executed a series of maneuvers that defied both conventional space combat doctrine and several laws of physics. The Shiva's arrow deliberately vented its warp plasma, creating a radioactive cloud that confused the hive's organic sensors. Meanwhile, the Thunderchild accelerated to attack speed, weaving through the enemy formation, its weapons blazing at anything in range. When a swarm of smaller hive vessels surrounded the Thunderchild, Park didn't hesitate. He drove the Shiva's arrow straight into the midst of the enemy cluster, weapons firing in all directions, taking devastating damage but creating a path for Han's ship to break through toward the command vessels. Our shields are failing, Yoon reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7, Park nodded. Maintain course, focus all remaining power on forward weapons. On the viewer, he could see the Thunderchild had reached the first hive command ship. Han's vessel, already trailing debris and venting atmosphere, rammed its bow directly into the larger vessel's side. The resulting explosion consumed both ships completely. She did it, whispered someone on the bridge. But 2 command ships remained. With the Shiva's arrow now critically damaged, Park made the only decision left. All hands abandon ship, he ordered calmly. Initiate Protocol Omega. As the surviving crew members raced for escape pods, the ship's computer activated its final protocol. With its human masters gone, the vessel calculated the optimal use of its remaining resources, a controlled overload of its antimatter core, timed to detonate between the 2 remaining hive command ships. From the relative safety of their escape pods, Park and his surviving crew watched as their home for the past 3 years accelerated one final time, driving itself like a burning spear into the heart of the enemy fleet. The explosion that followed was bright enough to be seen from the neighboring star system. In the aftermath, as concordant rescue vessels collected the human survivors, the enormity of what they had accomplished became clear. The hive fleet, though not defeated, had been thrown into disarray. The border world's evacuation ships had gained the precious time they needed to escape with millions more civilians than would have otherwise been possible. But the cost had been terrible. 3 ships lost in the jump and 2 more sacrificed in battle. Of the 5 crews that had set out on the mission, less than 100 personnel survived. As Park sat in the medical bay of a concordant cruiser, he overheard 2 alien officers discussing the battle in hushed tones. No concordant commander would have ordered such a mission, one said. The risks were beyond acceptable parameters. And yet, replied the other, we are alive to discuss it because they took those risks. The first officer's voice dropped even lower. What kind of species treats their own lives as so expendable? Park closed his eyes, too exhausted to correct them. It wasn't that humans valued their lives less. It was that they understood some things were worth dying for. But that was a concept he wasn't sure the Concordant would ever truly understand. The grand chamber of the Galactic Security Council gleamed with polished stone and living light sculptures, a stark contrast to the grim faces of the representatives gathered there. Every seat was filled, an occurrence so rare that many junior diplomats had never witnessed it before. The emergency session had stretched for 3 days without interruption, the debates growing more heated with each passing hour. At the center of the chamber stood a holographic display showing the devastation at the border worlds. The Hive fleet had been thrown into disarray, but the cost had been enormous. 3 human ships lost in transit, 2 more sacrificed in battle. The recordings of those final moments played on a continuous loop, focusing particularly on the UES, Shiva's Arrow's last desperate charge. We cannot ignore what we have witnessed, said the Concordant High Minister, his normally melodious voice rough with exhaustion. The human vessels employed tactics that our military analysts cannot even categorize. They deliberately exposed themselves to radiation levels that would kill any of our species instantly. They intentionally collided with enemy vessels. There, ships continued fighting even after all life aboard had ceased. An uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber. These facts were not in dispute. The question was what to do about them. Their method saved millions of lives, noted a representative from one of the border worlds, her facial tentacles curling with emotion. Without their intervention, my homeworld would now be consuming hive biomatter. At what cost? Countered another counselor. These humans treat warfare as something beyond our understanding. They do not fight as civilized species fight. Admiral Tay stepped forward, his formal uniform gleaming under the chamber lights. I have worked closely with the humans since their alliance with us began. I have studied their tactics, observed their training. They are not reckless, as some have suggested. They are different. Where we see impossible odds, they see challenges to overcome. Where we see certain death, they see necessary sacrifice. The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices, arguments flying back and forth until the High Minister called for order. We must make a decision, he said firmly. The hive incursion is not over. Our long-range sensors detect more of their vessels approaching from the galactic rim. What role, if any, should the humans play in our defense? The final vote took less than an hour, remarkably swift by council standards. The outcome was not what anyone would have predicted weeks earlier. 2 days later, Admiral Tay's shuttle approached Earth. Through the viewport, he could see the orbital shipyards working at full capacity, constructing new vessels to replace those lost at the border worlds. Humans, it seemed, did not waste time with excessive mourning. They honored their dead by continuing the fight. The shuttle docked at Earth Space Command headquarters, a massive station that combined military and civilian operations in a way that still confused Tay. The human tendency to blend these domains, to switch seamlessly between peace and war, was one of many aspects of their culture he struggled to understand. He was escorted to a conference room where several human officials waited. At their center sat Han, no longer a ship commander but now bearing the rank of Fleet Admiral. She had survived the Thunderchild's destruction by the narrowest of margins, rescued from an escape pod with life support systems on their last reserves. Admiral Tay, she greeted him, rising from her seat. He noted the fresh scars on her face and the slight stiffness in her movements, permanent reminders of her ship's final battle. The council has reached a decision? Yes, Tay replied, placing a data crystal on the table. I am here to deliver it personally. The room fell silent as the crystal projected 2 formal documents, their text scrolling in both human and concordant standard languages. Han read quickly, her expression darkening as she absorbed the first declaration. They're banning our ships from concordant space? She asked, voice carefully controlled. Not exactly, Tay corrected. The Council has officially classified human warships as too deadly for conventional space warfare and prohibited them from participating in standard concordant fleet operations. One of the human officials, a general whose uniform displayed more decorations than Tay could count, snorted in derision. So we save their worlds, and they thank us by banning our ships? Please, Tay said quickly, read the second declaration. Han's eyes moved to the second document, widening slightly as she processed its contents. Extinction Event Response Force, she read aloud. A new designation? Tay nodded. The Council recognizes that there are threats in this galaxy that cannot be addressed through conventional means. The Hive is one such threat. This declaration creates a new military division comprised entirely of human vessels, designed to respond to existential dangers to the Concordat as a whole. So, Han said slowly, they're afraid of how we fight, but not too afraid to use us when they're desperate? Tay met her gaze steadily. Would you prefer we did not call upon you at all? That we face extinction rather than ask for the help that makes us uncomfortable? The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. Finally, Han sighed. No, she admitted. That would be worse. The meeting concluded with the formal acceptance of both declarations. As the human officials filed out to begin implementing the new arrangements, Tay found himself alone with Han. There is something else, he said quietly. Something not in the official declarations. Han raised an eyebrow. Another restriction? No. Tay hesitated. The Council wishes to send observers to study your training methods, not to change them, but to understand them, perhaps even to learn from them in limited ways. This clearly surprised her. They want to learn how we fight? They want to learn how you think, Tay corrected. The courage your people showed at the border worlds. It is not something that can be programmed into a computer or designed into a ship. It comes from somewhere deeper. Han considered this for a moment, then nodded. I'll arrange it. But first there's something I want to show you. She led him through the station to a vast circular chamber. The walls were lined with holographic portraits, thousands of them, each showing the face of a crew member lost in recent battles. At the center stood a simple stone monument bearing the names of the 5 ships that had faced the hive. This is our memorial hall, Han explained. We build one after every conflict. Tay moved slowly around the chamber, studying the faces. So many lost, and yet the humans continued to volunteer for service, knowing the risks. You said once that our ships were too deadly, Han said softly. But it's not the ships that make the difference. It's the people who crew them. Tay understood then what the Council had been struggling to articulate. It wasn't human technology that frightened them. It was human nature itself. The willingness to face impossible odds, to accept devastating losses, to continue fighting when all logical analysis said surrender was the only option. We're not weapons you use lightly, Han continued, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet. Harasan, we're the weapons you pray you never need to use at all. A soft alarm chimed from Han's communicator. She checked it, her expression growing serious. Reports from the Deep Space Network, she explained. More hive signatures at the galaxy's edge, many more than before. How soon can your ships be ready? Tay asked. They already are, Han replied, turning toward the exit. The question is, are you ready to use us again? As they left the memorial hall, Tay glanced back at the thousands of faces watching from the walls. These were not the mindless drones the hive sent into battle, nor the career officers of the Concordat who expected to serve their time and retire with honors. These were warriors who understood that their service might require the ultimate sacrifice, and accepted that burden willingly. Admiral Han, he said formally, using her new title for the first time. On behalf of the Galactic Concordat, I am authorized to request the deployment of the Extinction Event Response Force. Han nodded, already mentally shifting into battle mode. Destination? The Argus Cluster. The Hive fleet appears to be gathering there, perhaps for a major offensive. They walked in silence for a moment, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. You know, Han said finally, your council is right about one thing. Our ships are too deadly for civilized warfare. She paused at a viewport, looking out at the newly constructed vessels waiting in their berths. But the galaxy now faces something far from civilized. Tay followed her gaze to the warships. They looked different from those he had first encountered 6 months ago. More angular, more heavily armed, designed with lessons learned from the border world battle. Your Concordat was built for peace, Han continued. Ours was forged in conflict. Perhaps that's why we see the universe so differently. She turned to face him directly. We don't want to fight any more than you do, Admiral. But when fighting is necessary, we commit to it completely. As they reached the command center, officers were already scrambling to prepare for deployment. Maps of the Argus cluster glowed on large displays, possible hive movements marked with pulsing red indicators. One last question, if I may. Tay said, watching the organized chaos of human military operations. When you know the odds are against you, when you know many will not return, how do you continue forward? Han looked around at her people, busy preparing to face an enemy that had nearly destroyed them before. Because someone has to, she said simply. And if not us, then who? Outside the viewport, the first ships of the Extinction Event Response Force began moving out of their docks, engines flaring bright against the darkness of space. Too deadly for conventional warfare, perhaps. but exactly what was needed when the stakes were survival itself.